Hello, welcome to episode 405 of the Sunday New York Times Read-Along. So glad to have you with us. My name is Neil Parekh. I'm the co-host and executive producer. Our guest co-host today is Walter D. Greason, Gray Sage. We'll explain the name change when we bring him on. He's a historian and author and a member of the Five-Timer Club for the New York Times Read-Along. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and our Digimentors website. We're also live on Scroll's YouTube. Thank you so much to Scroll for carrying our show. Please like, comment, share, retweet, do all the things you do to make sure people can find today's show. We are going to cover several topics today, but first I want to make sure that we thank our sponsors in particular, and that starts with the Muck Rack and Graphic History Company. Muck Rack is a longtime sponsor of the show. Graphic History Company joined us last year. Thank you so much for your support. And of course, the show is produced by Digimentors, the social and digital consulting firm that Sri started several years ago with his friend Andrew Lee. So for today's show, we have several topics lined up. We are going to be talking about voting rights, 61 years of the Voting Rights Act, and how they're under attack. We're going to be talking about the latest AI news. AI news, and particularly this story about the AI that created viruses not found in nature. That's definitely worth talking about. A couple other columns as well. And then we're also going to talk about local news. Walter is from Minnesota. So we're going to talk about the Minnesota Spokesman-Recorder, the newspaper he subscribes to, and the Minnesota Star-Tribune. Take a look at what articles and what stories they're focusing on locally. So like I said, we have a great show. And one of the things that we've been doing the last few episodes is we have gift links on our website for a lot of these articles and links to the Spokesman-Recorder and Star-Tribune. So you definitely want to look for that. And we actually have a new setup. You can go to our website, digimentors.group. You don't have to look for the New York Times Read-Along. You don't need to look for the specific episode. All you have to do is go to the homepage. And what we've done is that we've started sharing the featured show right on the front page. So if you go to digimentors.group, you can't miss it. It's right there, and then you click right through on the post, and you'll get to the show. So feel free to do that every week if you're looking for the gift links, PDFs, etc. We have a couple people we want to say hi to. John is watching from the East Village. John, always great to have you. Thank you. Amy McIntyre is watching on YouTube. It says, good morning from Washington State's Olympic Peninsula. Thank you, Amy. It's early your time. And my daughter was just in Washington State. She flew in last night from Seattle after being there for a week. Pam and I lived there for 15 years, so strong Washington ties. And Diane Stefani is watching from Margate, New Jersey. Thank you, Diane. Always great to have you. A couple other quick announcements before we bring on Walter. Wanted to make sure that you knew about the upcoming show, Shining Light on Shadows, a candid conversation about mental health. Episode 54, Compassion Before Cleanup, Mental Health, Clutter, and Shame. Dawn and I will be talking with Allison DeCamp, a decluttering and ADHD coach. And we'll talk about a lot of the issues around clutter and how it affects our mental health and some of the barriers to working through that clutter. I know that I've dealt with this and struggled with this over the years. Also want to make sure you know about the Jaipur Literature Festival coming to North America, North Carolina, Los Angeles, Seattle, Colorado, Toronto, New York, and Houston over September and the first weekend in October. You can learn more at jlflitfest.org, jlflitfest.org. And Sri's Sunday Note, his newsletter, the most recent article, Trump is spiraling and taking us all down with him. Now, what's interesting about this piece, we all know about the major headlines that Trump is generating, but there are a whole host of other issues that his administration is making a mess of. And Sri focuses on that in this newsletter. So check it out at srinet.substack.com, srinet.substack.com. Now I'm going to bring on our guest co-host, as I've mentioned, Walter Greason, Gray Sage, is joining us. Sri is out of town today. So I called in reinforcements, and the first person I wanted on the show with me was Walter Greason. And I'll put on the promo card to, oh wait, that's not the promo card for this week's show. That's actually the promo for January 19th, 2020. The first time Walter was on the New York Times Read-Along MLK Day. If you go to our website, you'll see his earlier appearances, and it's just fascinating to watch in terms of the production value, what we looked like, the graphics we used, etc. It's kind of the evolution of the show. But we'll talk more about that in just a minute. Let me bring on my good friend, Gray. How are you doing today?
Amazing. Thank you so much for the invitation to be a part of the show, Neil. It's just always a joy to be with you.
It was a no-brainer for me. As we mentioned, you are a member of the Five Timer Club, along with Steve Martin and several other luminaries.
Alec Baldwin, these are wild folks on SNL, but
Alec Baldwin,
I'm stacking up.
Right. You're building it up. I mean, I look back, 2020, we got you in 2021. We had a joint show with Kay Whitehead.
Yes.
I think we did 2 with Tim Fielder. And we had you on for a cameo earlier this year as well.
And the work is so brilliant, and it continues to grow every week. So it's just an inspiration. You all are the future of Sunday morning news. So it's just great to be here.
Well, thank you, Walter. And you didn't see my notes that I had, but I really, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is what draws you to the New York Times. You've been the read along. You've been watching and being a guest for 6 years. What makes this show important to you?
Well, folks who have seen me on here before know that I'm an Afrofuturist, and thanks to my dear colleague Ronaldo Anderson, got an official certification as a future forecaster a few years ago with the Air Force and a group called N-Square. And so I am not the typical historian who only looks at past evidence. I have a very specific skill set to be able to look at, both in the short term and long term, what's coming around the corner, what's likely to be the result of different decisions that happen every day. And so that work made me recognize what you and Sri were doing was breaking down a barrier. It'll sound wild to you and maybe the audience, but this is what people were looking at in the late 70s when Ted Turner started CNN, or when the folks at ESPN first took a chance on 24-hour sports. We're in that same kind of transition right now. Most people look at it as podcasting or video pods, but man, New York Times Read Along, by the strength of your network more than anything, You reach people globally every week and are talking about the most pressing issues people are most concerned with. So yes, you all have had my attention from the first time I ever encountered it. And I think it was probably either on Twitter or Facebook. But yeah, you have set the tone and designed a template that millions of people are now turning towards in a media environment that they find less and less reliable.
Thank you so much, Walter. We actually first connected in August of 2019 around the 1619 project.
Yes.
And I know we were tweeting back and forth about that, and then just got to know each other, got to be really good friends. For everyone else, I certainly think of Gray as a brother, and our it's you're the one person that I do a regular call with, and it means a lot when we have a chance to chat and just kind of relax and kind of process what's going on.
It's crucial for me too. Extra special shout out and thanks to Nicole Hannah-Jones. Had been online on Twitter talking with her for years in her role with the New York Times Magazine. And then when she in February, I think, announced in 2019 that she was doing this big project about 1619, that's what led to us having that conversation in August, is Absolutely. Being able to look at the impact of high quality journalism.
I want to say hi to a few other folks who have logged in. Stefan, good morning. Neil and New York Times Read Along fam. Hope everyone is staying cool. The humidity is high on the East Coast. Padmini Bhatt is watching on Facebook. Thank you. I'd watched your post before COVID. As brilliant as you are, and you know that what I truly believe in you, give blessings to children and family. Thank you, Padmini. Another guest, my mom. You can call her mom too. Well, after a lot of efforts, I got you. She was able to log in. So I'm glad you persisted. And Sojana is saying good morning. Mary Curtis, another part of the member of the Read Along family. Greetings from Charlotte. I always learn from the professor. I will be heading to National Association of Black Journalists in Atlanta this week to moderate a panel on voting rights battle. Could not be more timely. Would love looking forward to hearing your perspectives, Mary. And my mom, quick on the uptake. It is nice to have Gray again on the show. So before we dive in, and I want to make sure people know that Sri is out of town this week, and this new format of ours where it's more conversational and is more grounded in the back and forth in addition to the newspaper and talking the news. That's why we thought it's important to have someone else on the show with me today. And as I mentioned, Gray was the first person that I called. So we're not going to talk so much about your background and your research and your work. It's you're not a guest on today's show. You're a guest co-host. Yes. Which is a little bit different. You've evolved in terms of being a guest, being a guest with another colleague, doing a cameo, and now a guest co-host. But do us a quick favor and give us a little background in terms of the moniker Gray Sage that my mom picked up on, that you have on your under your camera. Where does that come from? What does that mean?
So there are a number of factors, goes back almost my entire life. But I'll say the most basic explanation is that people have mispronounced my last name forever, since like the first days of school. And so
Me too.
My father explained to me very early on that our last name was pronounced Greason, not Greason, not Gleason, like Jackie the comedian from the mid 20th century, but Greason. And so a number of factors came together in the last year to make me reevaluate it, including, frankly, the passing of both of my parents and a desire to acknowledge several different kinds of life experiences I've had that I generally hadn't talked through or had conversations with people about. One of them was actually at Shree's house, where we had to kind of deal with the questions around graphic history of hip hop and Sean Combs and why his actions are so obnoxious, intolerable to me. And so that work all was leading me to this moment of saying, what is the best way for people to call me, people to refer to me? And I'll be very frank, my grandfather's name is Walter, my godfather's name is Walter, but it was never a name that resonated with me. I was always is somebody else's name that had been applied to me. And so when I came to this real set of miracles that have happened for me over the last 10 years, I remembered that some of the people who cared most about me as a young person called me Gray, just Gray. And I was like, yeah, I like that way that feels. And so it's an invitation for anybody I'm working with that I'm getting to meet for the first time to know me in a different way. And so that's why I have literally changed my name. My birth name is still valid. If you still desperately want to call me Walter, it's all good. But I definitely prefer Gray. That is a much better way of understanding who I am.
Absolutely. It has nothing to do with the color of your hair.
Yes,
I mean,
aging was a factor.
Part,
aging was definitely a factor.
The sage part I get. I mean, I'd call you Great Sage, but yes, Gray works just as well.
No, that's around this notion of what professors are and where do we take kind of these titles from to refer to ourselves. And so just very briefly, I had about 10 years of religious training before I ever started becoming a historian. And so I looked for a lot of non-Western references to folks who have both formal academic and deep religious training. And that's what I came to, was sage was a nice kind of English language substitute for this idea of being a person of just strict formal learning, but also connected to something higher that humanity has always looked to for guidance.
Interesting. Thank you for the explanation. We have a couple other folks that have chimed in. Deborah is watching from Western Pennsylvania. Deborah, thank you for joining us. That's not where you usually are. So I'm curious of what you're doing, traveling, etc. Sujana left a comment, wouldn't know how that feels when she was talking about your name and kind of having that mismatch. So thank you. And Jonathan, John says, let me tell you about having a last name. A last name that gets mispronounced. Okay, so now I have two people on the show at the same time that I have butchered their names. When Walter was first on as a guest, I went the whole episode calling him Professor Greason, and he didn't say a word. He didn't say a word until after we were done, and I was so mortified. But you know, it happens. And of course, my last name, I've dealt with all sorts of different things. John, my friend, Sri and I have gone back and forth, and we keep, trying, remembering, forgetting. I think it's Borstein. Let me know in the comments if that's correct, because we went years referring to it Borstein. But give the phonetics in the comments, please, and I will do my best to burn it to memory. So we're gonna take a look at the hard copy of the paper, and I'm gonna look at the front page of every section just to give an overview of what's there, and then we'll come back and take a look at some of the topics that we picked out for today, particularly, and we'll come back to this in just a moment. We're going to be looking at voting rights under attack. We're going to look at the latest AI news, particularly the story about the AI that just created viruses not found in nature, which is certainly troubling. And also, I think they're trying to say that put a good spin on it, that might be a good thing. And we'll also take a look at local news from Minnesota, where Walter is based. So, Walter, this is going to be a fun time, and we're going to take a look at several things. And I'm going to see if I can make this transition work on my end. Before we switch to the New York Times camera, thumbs up, Walter, if you can hear me. I can see you backstage. That's great. All right, let's see if I can do this and bring up the newspaper. Let's see here. There we go, and voila. There is the newspaper, and you can hear me with the audio. It's always a fascinating trick. And we'll get back. John says we're ganging up on you. It's pronounced like a Bierstein, except there's two O's instead of two S's.
Interesting.
Bierstein. By the way, you're not the worst offender, but that is a tale for another day. So we'll have to get into that. So let's take a look at just the front page of every section, the cover, and this image is really great. I love the graphic design on this, Walter. Tracing the roots of a nation of immigrants, melting pot, tapestry, mosaic, kaleidoscope, detailed maps based on census data show how America came to be all these things. It's a special report on pages 9 through 12. And what you see here, the different colors, almost looks like a heat map. But what it shows is that in the deep south, the red is where there's African American heritage in terms of the immigrant. They're referring to Black Americans effectively as having an immigrant background, which I think is appropriate. It's the right involuntary immigrants, if you will, depending on how you want to frame that. Southern European up in New England. Western European here in the middle, Scandinavian, not surprisingly, around where you are, Minnesota, Wisconsin, North Dakota. Smaller font, Chinese in California, Native Americans in the Southwest, Mexican near Texas. But what's interesting is that they pull out certain localities, and it's hard to see. You might be able to read that just a little blurry. But Lowell, Massachusetts, top ancestries, 20% Cambodian, 12% Irish, and 8% Dominican, not far from Boston, which I thought was interesting. Orlando, of course, 52% African American, 15% Haitian, 8% U.S. Virgin Islander, and of course, this would be the ancestry of immigrants, as they're calling it, not the local population. That's the display story. The lead on the right, shrinking supply of U.S. munitions has wide effects. Result of war in Iran, thinning of arsenals in other regions could embolden rivals. I thought was interesting about that is Senator Mark Kelly kind of, not really, got in trouble from the defense secretary when he repeated the same kind of fact that was shared in a congressional hearing. He repeated it, in a press conference or in another venue, and then was attacked for giving out state secrets, which now we're seeing it on the front page of the paper. How the reflecting pool mirrored Trump's administration, laws and facts skirted, and blame passed. That story, Walter, if you caught last week, there was someone who was arrested, former Olympian arrested for vandalizing the reflecting pool, and Janine Pirro, the Washington District DC DA, dropped the charges because the record showed it was a contractor, not an individual, and Trump lost his mind over that. I'm surprised she wasn't fired on the spot. Were you following that story, Walter?
Absolutely, yes. And so every day we seem to get minute by minute new headlines about how disturbing policy decisions have become.
And it doesn't stop. I mean, it's kind of like you see something and then Trump tries to top it the next day. The other articles on the front page at Kennedy Center, few creatures were stirring, not even
And that's a little mouse over there. So I think they might have a mouse problem at the Kennedy Center. Here's a story, a 7-day retreat in Turkey centered on Sema, the ancient spiritual practice of whirling toward transcendence. That's the whirling dervishes. And I saw them when I was in Egypt. Definitely interesting. For more college graduates, moving home is a no-brainer, certainly in this economy. So that's the front page. We'll set that aside. Arts and leisure. So the front half of the paper, when you have it folded, you can't really tell what it is. You see an individual and flames, and the word "don't" in the corner. That is, don't try this at home. At the International Stunt School in Seattle, students master the art of falls, fights, and fire. Anyone interested in stunts should check that out. Business. So one of the things we're going to talk about is AI. The cover story, the impending inescapable deluge of AI. That's the headline. $1 trillion infrastructure build out would rival the creation of the railroads and the Manhattan Project, unless the bubble pops. Walter, can you wrap your head around $1 trillion infrastructure build out?
Yes. Yeah. No, that actually is one of the more subtle things in my career I'm really proud of. I want to say 15 years ago, I put out a book that for the first time explained to people the scale of $1 trillion economy. Almost everybody, even Wall Street, tended to talk in billions of dollars. And so that piece of transition, that's a great example of Afrofuturism, is being able to see the way markets change over time. And yeah, that last caveat that they give there, we're right in the moment where people will decide if the bubble is going to pop. And I do think the November election is going to have a significant impact on that. Not getting into my position on whether it should or shouldn't pop, but if it can get into the second quarter of next year without really falling to pieces, it's a seismic would be an understatement in terms of how the world is going to change going forward from the summer of 2027.
Are you thinking in terms of the elections? Is that if one party wins versus another, that we'd see a big difference?
Yes, the kind of regulatory oversight that you would see in the investigations into some of the problems among the major companies developing large language models and then kind of derivative systems that have emerged in the last 2 years. If they argue that they cannot slow down, that this will be a national security issue, that China will surpass the United States. And so if there's a major change in power and political authority in the Congress, there's definitely going to be a greater chance that the bubble pops and that growth will slow even marginally. And so that's a huge piece. Can you imagine in a world where we didn't have a real estate market and all of a sudden someone pioneered it? That is the kind of change we're facing now, where an entirely new set of commodities and services will be available and become part of our lives in the next 3 years at most.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. There's, we covered AI updates in our last episode as well. It almost feels like it's going to be hard not to have that be a standing topic every week, the way things are evolving. There's always something new to discuss. Sunday Opinion, the cover story, and this certainly aligns with my interest in mental health. The headline, Cameron started taking antidepressants in the 4th grade. 26 years later, trapped and numb, he wants out. A medicated generation searches for an exit. So this is an article by Camille Bromley. I'm not familiar with her, but certainly we've seen coverage around the medication. I don't know if it's certainly not our generation, Gen X, but millennials, I'm guessing. You had a deep sigh, Walter, when I read that headline. What did this bring up for you?
For me, one of my earliest teaching jobs was at the George School in Pennsylvania. And I was essentially teacher's aide, but it was residential program. So I was taking care of 12 young people. I was maybe 19. The students under my care were 9. And so right about the 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade area. And several of them had been heavily medicated. I think at the time it was mostly Ritalin. But the difference in their behaviors and kind of their level of activity, it was troubling even then. And so this is like 1992. And you could see that there were people leaning towards pharmacology as the primary way to parent. And it's just horrific at the scale that it's grown.
And I'm just looking for the inside for the jump here to see how they treat it internally. So this is also telling, Walter, it's a 2-page spread. It's the centerfold in the opinion section with a big inside headline. He grew up on antidepressants. Now he wants a way out. And this is a picture of Cameron in a river in Boise, Idaho, where he would immerse himself in frigid water for mental health purposes. Some of the subhead here, or maybe a pull quote, SSRIs can leave people feeling emotionally muted, but getting off the drugs is tricky. So I will say one of the things, and we'll talk about this a little bit. As folks know, I was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 51. I've shared that on my show, Shining a Light on Shadows, and have talked about it on this show and in conversation with others. And I started taking, one of the, in addition to therapy, continued therapy, group coaching, medication was also suggested. And, I don't know whether it's the medication or the group counseling, because they both happen at the same time. But I know that over the last 2 years, I've made incredible strides in understanding how my brain works and why I do what I do, so that I'm not kicking myself or getting down on myself when I can't do everything. My assumption was that I was Superman, and then I was disappointed when I couldn't get it all done. And that's one of the facets of ADHD. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Just to finish getting through the paper, the front page of Sunday Styles is "Let His Music Show the Way." Jack Johnson's Frozen in Time anthems inspire fans with a reassuring philosophy. Count the ways you can touch grass. Touching grass is such an important idea, Walter, to get out, particularly if you work from home like I do. The book review is Mother Lode, the cover story. Rachel Aviv's essay collection, You Won't Get Free of It, shows the breadth and complexity of matrilineal relationships. That's interesting. And the New York Times Magazine, I thought this cover was just phenomenal when I saw it. And when I looked online, you don't experience it this way. You don't see this. Obviously, what you see is a big red kind of smear, and you have to actually lean in. It says, "Is Everything Inflammation?" by Kim Tingley. So now you can see that maybe that's like a skin irritation or something. But that's the design I thought was just really interesting that they did for this. Interesting fact about the New York Times Magazine, they actually print that elsewhere and have it trucked back into New York to be distributed with the paper. And we did an interview with the editor-in-chief, Jake Silverstein, in his office on a Wednesday afternoon, my birthday week, two years ago when I turned 50. And he showed us the magazine that was going to come out that Sunday. So that was certainly a life highlight for both me and Sri. But that's a quick tour of the paper. And of course, I turned it upside down when I flipped it. But that's we'll get back to the paper in just a bit. As a reminder for folks, some of the topics we're going to delve into today are voting rights under attack. And I'll take that ticker off, voting rights under attack, and the AI, some additional AI news that's been going on, and the news from Minnesota. So we want to make sure that we cover that as well. So let's go ahead. I'm going to come back on screen.
And checking my audio is still good, Walter?
Yes.
Thumbs up? Good, good. Just making sure. So these three topics that we looked at, that we're looking at today, voting rights have been under attack for several months now, in particular with the Supreme Court decision. But Thursday was the anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, the signing of the Voting Rights Act by Lyndon Johnson. And as regular viewers know, one of our clients is the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation, which gives me incredible, it's an incredible honor to work with them and to ensure that his legacy carries on. What I want to do is to share a video that we put out about the Voting Rights Act, and then we will discuss from there.
Of August 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act into law, a moment born from the courage of ordinary people who marched, organized, and endured violence for the belief that every American deserves an equal voice in our democracy. Among them was a young John Lewis, whose courage on the Edmund Pettus Bridge helped awaken the conscience of a nation. For him, the act was never the finish line. It was the beginning of building what he called the beloved community. Congressman Lewis said, "The vote is precious. It is almost sacred. It is the most powerful, nonviolent tool we have in a democratic society." More than 60 years later, the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation carries that work forward through civic engagement, youth leadership, and the philosophy of good trouble. Democracy is not a state, it is an act.
And that's the quick 1-minute version, Walter, of that video. We have a full-length version on our website, on the John Lillian Miles Lewis website, that I'll share the link for. And I'll just type that in here if folks are interested. But tell me from your perspective. I mean, I have my own thoughts, and both from working with the foundation and elsewhere, but the Voting Rights Act, what does it mean to you?
Oh, that's a huge question. Yeah, just
2 minutes.
you want me? I'm going to do that in a couple seconds. Okay, so a few years ago, in another digital forum, someone was attempting to say, "Well, voting is overrated. Voting is not something most people really need to be concerned about," and I really launched into them online and said, "So who is it important for then? Is it not important for anyone, or just the group of people that you're addressing?" It was primarily African Americans and African American men that this person was speaking to. And so there's this impulse in this country, and it's reached a new height, frankly, due to the Supreme Court, that voting should be restricted to the very wealthy. They're the only ones who know what to do with votes, and other people who have less should not be heard. I come from a very small rural community that got wiped off the map as suburbs grew and they converted the land. That experience showed me how important it is that everybody has a vote. I made my college decision based on the example of John Lewis, to go into the lion's den and stand up against people who believe these kinds of things. This work is vital to the idea of what freedom is. And so every day of my life is impacted by the passage of the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act. The attempts to undo all of that legislation and to return us to a world where property qualifications and wealth determine who has a voice. It's the antithesis of what this society has evolved into. And so for me, that to ask about the Voting Rights Act, it's one of the defining features of who I am. And I'm actually struck in watching the video, and I'm certainly guilty of this. The solemn tone we take around it is definitely appropriate, but I do think we need to have a kind of jubilation about our right to vote. And I'm going to work through this fall and next year to make it more celebratory, because the solemnity gets a certain audience to come out. But I think if we have more things like voting parties, voting conversations, voting cookouts, these events will actually energize more people who aren't typically reached. And we do need to treasure the right to vote. And I do want to encourage everyone, especially as we head into late August and September, be energized, be organized. Your vote is literally the treasure that protects your life.
Well said, Walter. I think there's a parallel between what you're suggesting and moving away from or beyond the solemn approach to how we think of Juneteenth. That it's not, I mean, slavery obviously is something that you spend too much time thinking about will bring you down, but Juneteenth is a celebration of the Black experience. It's a celebration. It was the day that folks in Galveston first heard of the Emancipation Proclamation 2 years after it was issued. And it's been carried forward as a day to celebrate and honor and really revel in the Black culture, Black experience, Black achievement. I think there might be a parallel there with voting rights, that we can make that a party, make that a celebration. I think that maybe we can think of two holidays, right? Kind of like for Selma, for Bloody Sunday in March, keep the solemnity there, because that was the focus was on the violence and the beatings that took place. But the signing of the Voting Rights Act, not an end point, of course, but a celebratory point. For folks who are watching,
right? We don't celebrate these landmark pieces of legislation the way we should. We kind of take them for granted. We think that because we can go shopping and we get our Amazon boxes delivered to the door and this kind of consumer sense of freedom, we think that's what being free is. And so just taking a little time, whenever possible, to reflect on the courage to be free and not to just be trapped in the materialism of it. That's a revolutionary approach to take in today's world.
And I want to let people know that we have gift links on our website to several articles related to the show, particularly voting rights, AI, voting rights and AI. For the voting rights articles, I went back to June mostly. There's a great piece, interview with Senator Raphael Warnock. There's several articles following up on the Supreme Court decision. So encourage you to go to digimentors.group to find those articles, find that those links. And as a reminder for folks, if you joined us late, we have reformatted our website. So if you just go to our homepage and look at on the right-hand side, you'll see the featured show. You could click right through to this week's show to find links, PDFs, etc. So I encourage you to do that. Go to digimentors.group and you'll find those links. The other topic, or the second topic, rather, that we want to focus on, Walter, is AI. And we looked at a great story about infrastructure in terms of the business section, but an article that caught my attention this week, I don't know if you saw this headline, "This AI just created viruses not found in nature, which, as headlines go, it certainly gets one's attention. Did you catch that story? I'm going to bring
Yes.
it up in just a second. What did you make of that?
So again, this is where my work sits at this moment. Right now, higher education is deciding what ways are appropriate use for large language models. I try to avoid saying artificial intelligence or generative artificial intelligence. It's not intelligent. It's not intellectual. It's a reflection of a massive aggregation of human expression that leads to really troubling results, like the idea of synthesizing viruses that don't exist prior to the moment. And so the potential for that and its medical applications is one important aspect. But in the context of a CDC and a Department of Health and Human Services that is making people sicker, in a world that has cut off aid to billions of people and has spiked death rates across hundreds of countries, this is a real cause for alarm. And so it's a moment where we really need to take a breath and step back and say, okay, how do we most effectively use these new tools? And you and I have had private, separate conversations about the way people use these robots. For the folks who don't know, the primary reason I got to be a futurist as a historian was because I had a software engineering background before I started doing history. And so all as a hobby alongside my historical career, I built websites, I built web crawlers, I built chatbots, just because I knew the capacity would grow the ability for my work to be dynamic and relevant. And so I am not someone who uniformly and reflexively condemns these robots, but I am someone who is deeply informed and wants to be thoughtful and cautious about the way that they're developed. And so I just published an essay 2 weeks ago on this idea of what AI does. And so if anybody wants to see any of that data, you can find me on Blue Sky or on Threads. But that work, we need the public to understand the nature of these robots more. As the robot turned off the light in my room.
Yeah, right. Something turned that off. The key line in the article: for the first time, scientists have used artificial intelligence to create new kinds of viruses, raising hopes for medical advances, while also raising the disturbing possibility that the technology could someday be used to invent dangerous pathogens. And I think that the headline, as it's written, at least my mind went straight to dangerous pathogens. When we looked at, I imagined AI creating viruses and then letting them loose on the world. That's certainly something to be fearful of. And last week we talked about how several AI models did get loose and did attack organizations, a library, etc. So that was definitely interesting. Another article that I thought I wanted to take a look at is actually by Brett Stevens, who is a more conservative columnist. And his take, Walter, I think you would, I'd be curious about your thoughts on this. His headline, "I'm begging you," and I'm going to pull that up before I read it. "I'm begging you, never write with AI." He's not pulling any punches there. Never write with AI. And he goes on to talk about how it's not an argument, it's a plea. Don't use AI to help you write. Never. Don't use it for school papers, work briefs, letters. Don't let it organize your notes. Don't let it suggest an opening sentence. And he goes on to say that there is something you lose when you're not writing yourself. There's a thought process. There's a muscle that you're not using. Speaking speak to that a little bit in terms of in 2026, the idea of stepping away from tools completely and not seeing a role for them in creating content as broad as you can define it.
It's so funny. You framed it around the word content. And that is exactly one of these battlegrounds that people are having right now, is that I'm around a ton of artists. I work with hundreds of artists producing historical representations, visualizations. And artists hate the word content because it reduces the value and the sense of the craft that goes into the work that they do. And I find that writers feel much the same way, especially scholars who have dedicated their lives to the process of peer review and then the meticulous editing of every word that gets published under their name. And so to me, this is very different than the culture of coding. Coding requires meticulous care, but is often much more collaborative. There's a sense of redundancy that's involved in it. There are still systems of peer review. And so that's been kind of the intersection of how I come to the conversation is, can you code? How well do you write? And then can you visualize? Are you artistic enough? Music, graphics, whatever field, sculpture, to actually produce quality work that represents your ideas. And so for someone who blends those skills, their approach to an LLM is just very different. There's just so many checks that are already operating in their mind that the tool is working for them, not the tool determining the output that they create. And so I think there are still limitations and boundaries we have to put on it in that case. But for folks who don't have a lot of skill, who haven't taken years of writing and coding and artistic training, yeah, I can agree with Stevens on that. Like, you will shortcut your neurological process as a biological life form. Your brain will not become as capable as it might otherwise. And so to me, it's really important in my context in education, both K-12 and higher ed, and really any professional development setting where you're trying to get licenses and people rely on your competency to deliver expert insight. In the training process, you cannot rely on this. And I had a really tragic experience a few years ago where students were just using regular kind of spell checkers and cut and paste to take huge amounts of data and pass it off as their own research. And so there are real risks that violate any kind of clear academic standards and governing educational ethics. However, at the high end of the process, had someone, I don't know what scientist, everybody's talked about Dr. Fauci recently. I would love to get his take on this idea of synthetic viruses and how to contain that kind of exploration. For years, there have been memes about Jurassic Park, where science can show you how to clone something. Humanities tells you why you probably shouldn't.
But should you?
And so that whole thing, like, not enough people think through that basic principle of, yeah, new tools are amazing, but be really thoughtful about the process by which we start to use them.
Well, I don't know how you feel about Bret Stephens on a regular basis, but I think, is the other paragraph, the problem with writing with AI is that it's mentally enfeebling, an escalator toward a result when you really need to make a daily habit of taking the stairs. As it becomes ubiquitous, it undermines not only our individual ability to write, but also a society's collective ability to reason. A culture's inner capacity to create and everyone's reason to care. We're already reckoning with the well-documented decline of reading. AI is accelerating the decline of writing, ushering us further into what the Atlantic's Rose Horowitz calls our post-literate age. Walter Greason, Grace Age, and Bret Stephens on the same page.
Well, wait now.
Maybe
No.
a little bit on this one topic.
I would temper his pessimism as I would with most conservative intellectuals.
Yeah.
So I've taught media literacy for a very long time, and Neil Postman's book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, is a centerpiece of what I do in those courses. What Postman misses, what Stevens misses, and apparently Horowitz as well, is that literacy changes with every generation. And so I get into fights with people who say, you have to read books, you have to turn pages, that's the way you do it. Well, some of the smartest people I know listen to audiobooks. Does that mean that they are post-literate? I don't buy it. And so learning to read, think, and decode across media, to me, is a higher stage of literacy than just reading print copy. It's still wonderful to do. I'm not trying to abolish books or newspapers or magazines, but being able to do multiple things is a growth of our intellect, not a reduction of it. And too often we miss that with folks who are early in their learning process, but deeply engaged with movies, video games, internet, social media. There's an enormous store of intellect there that I think these comments, these articles underestimate.
Appreciate the clarification. I will be careful about putting you and Mr. Stevens on the same page in the future. I do want to bring in a couple of comments from folks who are watching to catch up a little bit.
I've been missing them. I want to hear more.
I know, right? I do want to acknowledge Sammy is watching on Instagram. I got to turn this way to see my Instagram screen. Sammy, thank you for the kind comments. I met Neil, and he's like the kindest person. Always nice to hear that kind of thing. Paula is watching from Battle Creek, Michigan. Paula is our longtime producer, and she was a special guest co-host a few weeks ago when we celebrated our 400th episode, which was an incredible milestone. Paula, thank you so much for coming back for that. If you missed that, you can find that on our website. We had three of my favorites, Tom Jolly, Wayne Camadoy, and Mike Connors, celebrate our 400th episode with us. It's 10 years of the read-along, 275 individual guests. Just an incredible milestone. So thank you, Paula, for joining us for that. We also have Ron Thomas joining us, which Walter did a great show with 2 weeks ago, I think now, on a Friday morning.
Ron, it's just a couple days. What's up, man?
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Hello, everyone. My dear friend, Dr. Greason. And we had such a great time a few Fridays ago. Great interview. Absolutely. And Deborah dropped in a link to the article about the census and immigration. Deborah, thank you for doing that. It's always a little challenging for me to drop in links to articles while I am managing the more of the hosting. So appreciate you doing that. And we do have Ziggy watching on YouTube Shorts, saying hello from Palestine.
Oh my goodness!
Gives us a little of the international flavor.
Wow.
Today. Sujana, going back to a few articles we talked about, the medication piece, the cover story on opinion is nuanced and worth the read. So we should definitely go back to that. Talking about voting rights, Mary Curtis, agree on voting parties. My last roll call column was on tricks GOP majority North Carolina elections is playing to restrict the vote. And that's happening across the South. Redistricting may backfire, though, since GOP Congressman Edwards had to bow out due to scandal. So we'll see how that plays out in November. Talking about voting, Miriam talks about you can always get a little sticker saying I voted. That's around the country, I think, and they have different designs. I know in Georgia they have a little peach to show that I voted. John has a different thought on that, though. The sticker is annoying and inappropriate. I do realize that as much socioeconomic as it is generational. So there's some interesting dialogue back and forth about that. My mom, Neil Parekh, I think more awareness, education, importance should be created around all of this around voting rights, AI, etc. Deborah thinks that the viruses is a scary idea that is being created. And Naomi shared that she made good trouble yesterday protesting puppy mills.
Oh,
Even small gestures honor John Lewis.
yes,
Absolutely,
yes.
Naomi. Thank you for that. And Jonathan mentions that Postman's book is a classic. So again, one of the features that we like about the read along, about the way we produce it, is that it is a family. We're able to bring in audience comments and engage with people and share their perspectives. We're at 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. Walter, with your permission, if we can go a few minutes longer, because I really do want to talk about local news in Minnesota. That was the third item that I had on my list. Talked about voting rights, some of the latest AI news, and now the news from Minnesota. So the first question I have for you is I referenced both the Star-Tribune, which is the daily newspaper there, the mainstream paper, if you will. But you subscribe to the Minnesota Spokesman-Recorder. Can you tell us about the Spokesman-Recorder? Why do you subscribe to that paper?
Yes, sir. No, that's a wonderful question. The Spokesman-Recorder is the oldest African-American newspaper published in the state of Minnesota. And most people don't realize there's a really amazing history of African-Americans in this state. Goes back even before the Dred Scott decision, which is where most people pick it up. They will learn that Dred Scott came to Fort Snelling and was part of his case that very famously became a trigger for the 1860 election and the debate around restricting slavery to where it already existed. And so the Spokesman-Recorder gives you a snapshot of life in Minnesota that very, very few people get to see. So when I came and moved here, I was looking around for this kind of media outlet. There are several Black newspapers, but the Spokesman-Recorder circulates the most widely. And trying to support local, independent, particularly ethnic media, wherever you are, is absolutely vital. And so I can't encourage people enough to just find local papers, neighborhood papers, and find ways to support them. Pioneer Press is another one in St. Paul that's really outstanding. But yeah, the Star-Tribune is the juggernaut, is the big main paper for the Twin Cities and broadly for the state of Minnesota. And it has run into issues with becoming much more corporate and some of the demographic tensions where it represents suburban perspectives much more than it represents people who live within the Twin Cities. Those things come up pretty frequently with the Star-Tribune. I would say older audiences that are wealthier still see the Star-Tribune as their primary venue for looking at news in the state. But younger audiences have all transitioned to digital media, and Minnesota Spokesman-Recorder has been really adept about getting in front of that and getting onto platforms like Instagram. I get regular updates from them on Threads. And so I have real questions about Meta and as a company and the way it performs, especially around large language models. But Minnesota Spokesman-Recorder is one of the absolute treasures that people can access, especially in a time when we're dealing with, ICE invading cities and attempting to round up people on the street on suspicion of immigration violations. And so I know that resonates with a lot of my folks back in Jersey who are dealing with similar issues. But really nationwide, if you want to see what's actually happening and it's not being filtered aggressively to reinforce government or big business perspectives, local and ethnic newspapers are amazing. Please take time to find one and subscribe.
And you mentioned the Star-Tribune. Trying to bring it up for you. I actually did fill out a free subscription with limited access just to be able to show it online. It just had to log in. So give me 1 second to do that.
No, my favorite thing about Star-Tribune is the coverage of our amazing WNBA team, the Minnesota Lynx, owned by one of my good friends from childhood, Mark Laurie, along with Alex Rodriguez.
Oh, wow.
And so the Lynx and the Timberwolves are both amazing stories, and love to see the coverage. The Twins are always trying to put something better back together. You know, not the Yankees, not the Dodgers. And so they to me, it's just enjoying baseball, especially minor league baseball here in St. Paul is amazing with the St. Paul Saints. But yeah, there's so much good in Minnesota, especially this time of year. If folks have not come out to visit, this is the time. Mid-August to early October, it is one of the most beautiful places in the country, and I would say one of the most beautiful places in the world. Definitely come out to Minnesota in the late summer to autumn.
So I'm going to try one more time. I was trying to show the news and politics, but their subscription banner keeps popping up, and I can't get around it, unfortunately. But I think one of the things that, the reason I wanted to bring that up, Walter, is that we have talked about on the show that although we focus on the New York Times, we have looked at other newspapers around the country: the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Washington Post, Dallas Morning News, Toronto Globe and Mail, the Collegiate Times, Politico, and the Wall Street Journal. And it's something Sri and I feel very strongly about, that it's about news and news consumption and understanding and being able to fight misinformation and disinformation. It's not just about the New York Times. We have a very special relationship with the New York Times, of course, going back a number of years, and with our, some of the guests and the context we have there. But we always encourage people, support your local newspaper, subscribe to something, particularly for some of these newspapers that are going into public journalism and nonprofit journalism, in Philadelphia in particular and elsewhere. Anything we can do to keep these voices active, covering local politics, local state legislatures, local school boards, etc., the better.
Can I just add something real quick?
Of course.
Yeah. So on that point, I am clearly an advocate for digital media. So I would love to connect the audience here with a website called Black and White and Red All Over. Black and White and Red All Over. It's put together by Benjamin Railton, who's a professor at Fitchburg State in Massachusetts, and his wife, Vaughn Joy. They're amazing. They compile some of the best writing every single week and release it under the hashtag Scholar Sunday. So definitely take a look there to get even deeper dives on these subjects. But I would love to also help put together a read-along for Spokesman-Recorder one day. So maybe a few months from now at some point, we could do something, maybe February. Could do a Minnesota Spokesman-Recorder read-along, and I would get digital copies for everybody to enjoy. But the big one for me is The Guardian. If there was ever a way we could think about making a read-along about The Guardian, this also relates to Minnesota. One of my colleagues and his wife are currently under federal indictment for organizing basically community defense against ICE. And so along with, 11 or 12 other people, these folks have put their lives on the line and are facing persecution by the federal government. The Guardian did an amazing article on the situation. And so McAllister's a really amazing place where just talented scholars stand up for what's right every day. And so please take a look at the Guardian article, think about a Guardian read along, and always, if there are ways you can support us here in Minnesota during this era, we need it. We need everybody's help and attention.
And before I share this link, I want to make sure that this is the right black and white and red all over.
No, this is that's a sports outlet. So that's not Ben's page, but black and white and red all over. It's probably like .org or something.
Okay, drop the link if you can, and I'll make sure to share it with folks.
Let's see.
That's always a challenge when you're doing things on the fly. Sometimes you get it wrong. But I will share the link to the Spokesman-Recorder for folks. I think it's definitely worth taking a look at.
Oh, and you know what the difference is? Instead of it being
Yeah.
the color red, it's, oh no, that took me to the wrong spot again.
Yeah. We'll have to figure it out.
blackwhiteandred.com. So I'm going to send that to you.
Okay, great. But here is the Spokesman-Recorder that you were talking about earlier. We will, one of the things that we want to follow up with you about, the New York Times is starting a new newsletter, a local newsletter for the Twin Cities. It's coming out in August. And so once it comes out, we'll ask you to report back on what that looks like and what the reception looks like for that piece. See what folks think. And here is black and white, red all over. Thank you, Walter. I'll just share that for folks so they can get eyes on it. Again, we went a little bit past our 1 hour time frame for the show. Appreciate your indulgence.
I can't stop talking.
Always,
you know.
Well, I don't think it's just you. But this is black and white and red all over that you were talking about, and we'll share that link in Facebook for folks as well.
Thank you.
In case you joined us late, and we have a couple people who are saying hello. Rose Horowitz chimed in with a comment about local news, saying absolutely support local news media. If you joined us late, you'll be able to watch the show from the beginning on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and our Digimentors website shortly after we finish. And Miriam is talking about McAllister. I think autocorrect got her, but it has a very interesting, distinguished heritage novelist. Tim O'Brien went there.
Yes,
I'm sure there are other alum of note coming out of McAllister.
My personal shout out is Denai Guerrera, the actress who plays Okoye in the Black Panther films.
Oh,
she
yeah?
is a McAllister alum.
Nice. I want to remind folks again that the Jaipur Literature Festival is coming to North America in September and October. There are a number of cities where it's hitting: North Carolina, Los Angeles, Seattle, Colorado, Toronto, New York, and Houston. You definitely want to check that out. And Sri's latest newsletter, his Sunday Note, Trump is spiraling and taking us all down with him. You can find his newsletter at srinet.substack.com, srinet.substack.com. And if you hadn't noticed, we recently joined, or rather rejoined, Patreon. If you want to support this kind of journalism, this kind of work, and Sri's various newsletters, join us on patreon.com/srinet. Even a couple of dollars would help.
Nice.
The last announcement, I want to remind people of the show on mental health that I do twice a month, a candid conversation, shining light on shadows, a candid conversation about mental health. Episode 54, Compassion Before Cleanup, Mental Health, Clutter, and Shame. That will be August 13th, Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Allison DeCamp will be our guest. Walter, we talked about a little bit earlier when we talked about medication. I was diagnosed with ADHD 2 years ago, which changed everything for me. But I will say that not just doing this show and talking openly about the challenges I've had around anxiety and depression and now ADHD has been liberating. I've been able to talk about it on shows like this, in meetings with people. If I feel like there's an opening, I never would have talked about it in a professional setting. But just the other day, meeting with someone for the John Lewis Foundation, they referenced their own challenges dealing with grief. And we were able to open up a whole conversation around mental health. And she might be a guest on our show to talk about how she's coping and managing with her own grief. So this is something that I think is hopefully we're going to keep doing. Dawn is a great co-host. I encourage everyone to watch. We have a couple of other comments. John says, good show. Thank you. My sister chimed in from Bellevue. And again, Amy, if you do want to catch the earlier part of the show, you can watch it on replay on most of the channels, except for Instagram. Instagram is a little trickier that way. And I do want to check. We have one other comment on LinkedIn. You've been on the receiving end of this, Walter, where your comment doesn't show your name and face. And I want to see whether I can find the person watching their comment. Let me see if I can bring it up. Unfortunately, I can't. So the person who is watching and says hello from New York, if you put in your name, I'd love to be able to give you a shout out. Amy says, great show. I'm following Gray on social media now. So Gray, a little more love there. And again, for folks who may join late, we covered 3 major topics in addition to the reviewing the paper today. Voting rights under attack, the latest AI news, and the news from Minnesota. Gray, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for giving us a few extra minutes this morning. This conversation covered a lot, and I want to remind people of how far we've come from your very first appearance on the show, January 19, 2020. If you look at that video, it's almost like time travel. I mean, it's incredible to see how things have changed since then. So thank you again.
Man. So grateful to know you. Thank you for inviting me to be a part.
Absolutely. And we will close out the show. I'll check one more. I'll leave. My mom gets the last word. Great show. Couldn't be more appropriate. Thank you, Mom, Sudha Parekh, for watching. And we'll see you next week with another edition of the Sunday New York Times Read Along. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.